welcome to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. My guest today is Amy Palmer. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you, Lori. So good to see you.
Before I hit record, Amy and I were trying to remember how we originally met because it was several years ago. And Amy used to live in Washington, D.C., and we figured we couldn't figure it out actually. I think it was Washington Network Group, but we were also both super networkers, so we did a lot of stuff. We Our paths crossed many times.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they're crossing again. They could,
Yeah,
all this time later.
exactly. I was just going to say, so right, because this was several years ago, and then we
Mhm.
kind of tangentially stayed in touch, like through LinkedIn and stuff, because that's what LinkedIn is great for.
Mhm.
And yeah, and then I was a guest on Amy's podcast a little while ago, and then here she is on Fine is the Four-Letter Word. So
Well, I'm happy to be here and talking
yeah,
about being fine or
being
not.
fine. Fuck being fine is
Yeah,
what we're
being
talking
fine.
about.
Yes,
Yeah, I
works
forgot
for
to
me.
tell you at the beginning, which but you probably already knew. Like, we're not editing for language here.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Fine by
yeah.
me.
Yeah, so start out by telling me like what were the values and beliefs that you were raised with that contributed to you becoming who you grew into as an adult?
Okay. Well, I would say, I had like a very quote traditional upbringing in a very traditional family in upstate New York, Syracuse, New York, to be exact. And I think what I learned a lot about family and loyalty and tradition and connection. Um, and really like the value of working hard. I definitely
Mm.
got my work ethic growing up. I went out and got my first job when I was 11 years old without my parents knowing. So
Why didn't you want them to know?
because they wouldn't have said yes. I was 11 years old.
Okay.
I,
What was your first? So what was the job then?
well, called to be a paper boy, paper girl. Like I wanted to be a paper. So I called directly, and it was funny because like this regional distributor guy, he was like some 40-year-old man shows up at the house asking for me. My mom's like, what the hell? So
What is this predator doing
right,
here?
right, right. But like I wanted a job. I wanted my own money. I wanted to do my own thing, and I did it for years. And I outsourced to my little brother.
Oh
So
wow.
so yeah. So I learned a lot about that, and so I think a lot of those values contributed to a lot of my positive traits and the positive things that have happened in my life. And there's sort of like both sides to that coin too. There was also, in my view, I thought there was a lot of expectation, whether verbally expressed or not, of what my life was supposed to look like. Like
Mm.
in my head, I was supposed to, do well in school and then, go to college and get a great job and meet a young man and fall in love and get married and have a couple kids and then do the whole trajectory thing. So I definitely learned all of that and internalized
Hmm.
that a lot as well. And a lot of those things did not come to fruition for me. So I spent a big chunk of time sort of unlearning some of that, like just sort of reframing some of that as well.
Yeah. Did you intentionally reframe it or it didn't happen that way so you had to reframe it because that's not what happened? Or like so what I'm asking is
Yeah.
did you not want it to work that way or it just didn't work out that way?
Right. Great question. It didn't work out that way. I wanted I wanted to have a more traditional path. Um, Particularly, I wanted to meet a partner and get married. Still could be possible, but growing up, that was number one. Having kids was sort of number two, like it was like a second tier
Mm-hmm.
priority, but still a priority. And when those things started to not happen, or it seemed more and more likely that things weren't going to happen, I struggled with that identity, and I struggled with those feelings, and I had to figure out how to reframe it. I had to be able to look at things differently, and I had to find another way to find joy and purpose and fulfillment and all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what was the career path that you originally took?
Yeah. So here's where I bought back and forth between tradition and non-tradition. Um, I started out pursuing a career in acting, so, so not really
Okay.
tradition, not traditional. So yeah, so I went to school for theater and got my degree there, and moved to New York City and pursued an acting career, and did that for years. Loved it, but didn't love the business of it. It was
Uh-huh.
really difficult, especially for someone with no connections and very little like financial resources. Even
Mhm.
back then, this is back in the 90s, and it still required like a lot of resources, a lot of connections, all that. Um, so the thing, while I was pursuing my acting degree, the way or career, the way that I paid the rent was I started to take on sales jobs. So I would do different sales
Mm.
roles for different companies, and eventually I started to sort of rise up on that side of things. I started to like earn more money, and then I started to climb the corporate ladder and explore different industries, and realized I liked being able to support myself financially.
I liked being able to pay rent
Yeah,
and buy food. Yes.
yeah, that was a good thing. So I continued on that path, pursuing a corporate career for many years. So
Okay. Yeah. So maybe this is interesting because I think a lot of times we feel like it's a tangent, but maybe it's really a better use of your skills. Like you are called to do that because that's really, I'm not saying you weren't a talented actor, I don't know, but I'm just saying maybe that the universe was redirecting you because that was where your skills were more, more needed or something.
yeah, who knows? Who knows? I
Do you
actually think one helps the other. So like when I started out in sales and I went into operations and other corporate leadership roles, I learned that my training and experience as an actress absolutely prepared me. Because one of the things when you're studying acting, you're studying how and why other people are motivated, like what
Mhm.
motivates people to do things and what inspires them to do things. Those were all key learnings that I then fed into my corporate career. Plus the just the aspect of perseverance and dealing with rejection, like all of those things from my acting experience,
Yeah.
absolutely played into my corporate experience, and then later into my more entrepreneurial experience as well. So it, like you
Yeah.
said, like it all kind of goes together.
I could totally see how acting would play into being better in sales and in corporate roles because it for the reasons you said, but also because like, that whole like fake it till you make it, and we can debate whether that's like a valid thing or not. But
Hmm.
when you aren't feeling confident, like I've read a lot of or heard podcasts or wherever I've heard this, but like stepping into that role of like your superwoman or, putting on not really a facade, but like your alter ego. There's actually a book called your The Alter Ego. I can't remember his name who wrote it. But cool book, and he talks about when you're faced with a situation that's challenging, that feels scary to take on this alter ego. It's still you, but it's a braver version of you.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so I could see how acting would help with that. Do you ever regret not going down that path further?
No.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I've still done a little of it, like more for the fun part of it over the
Mm-hmm.
years. And I would love to do it again. I always envision myself like when I retire, whatever that means,
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I'm probably going to be like one of those old lady actresses, at some point. So
Right,
it's not,
right.
you can always go back to it, you know.
You're playing the grandma. Well, here's the
Exactly.
scary thing. Here's the
Yeah.
scary thing though. Like people our age are actually grandmas now.
I know, I know.
Some of them.
Right.
I'm just like, wait a second. This is not like
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
No.
You know
We're
what's
too young.
cool? I know, but you know what's cool about now? I mean, I can fool myself into being young because I don't have kids making me face
Same.
where I am. Right. So, but a lot of our peers, like we have peers not only that have, older kids, but I've got friends with really young kids too, in our
Right.
age group. So it's like this wide variety. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like my nephew is 13. I'm like, no, that's where it should be. That's where that feels right.
Yeah, yeah.
Kids,
Let's keep it that
kids.
way.
Exactly. Kids, our friends, kids getting married and having their own kids. No, not for that.
No.
Not ready for that.
Right, right.
Yeah, I'm not ready for it. So don't you do it, right? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So take me further down the path of your, because then you became entrepreneur.
I did, yeah. Um,
And how did
um,
that come about? Like, what was
yeah,
the impetus for that? Where you
yeah.
went, you know what? I'm not the money I'm making in corporate. I'd rather do this
I
on
know,
my own.
I know. It always seems so silly, but yeah. So at the time, I mean, it's something I know you can relate to. It's not like I was deeply unhappy. I was just fine. Like I was just like, and I was just kind of like going through the motions. It wasn't really doing anything for me. And so I actually went to a career coach because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next.
Mm,
And I never thought entrepreneurship was going to be the answer because,
okay.
my family, that I don't come from an entrepreneurial family. I come from
Mm-hmm.
you get a great job, with great benefits, hopefully a pension, that kind of thing.
Right.
Uh,
Work for the same company forever.
exactly. So I just wanted to figure out, okay, which industry am I going
Mm-hmm.
into? And it's the first time I ever hired a coach of any type. So it was my first exposure to that whole world. Um, and through that process, it slowly became evident to me that I was really excited about the prospect of building something of my own and creating
Mm-hmm.
it instead of trying to fit into somebody else's thing. And my coach sort of, she started to suggest it, and my first response was, "Oh no, 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 I couldn't do that." And then the more we started talking about it, I just got really excited about it. So um, that was back in like I don't know 2004, something like that.
Uh-huh.
So I did that for a good decade. I did sales and consulting. I had a training, coaching, and consulting business that I did for about a decade at that point.
In sales, like training, coaching, consulting around sales.
Sales and leadership. It was a little bit of
Yeah.
both, but
Yeah.
very business focused. Growing companies, scaling, all of that stuff.
Right. Okay. And then you went back into working for someone else.
I did.
Which
Yeah.
I it's cool. It's I want to emphasize that because people think they get into entrepreneurship and then they can
Yeah.
never go back
Right.
and like
Right.
it's a failure. Did you feel like you were failing to go back into working for someone else?
No, because I felt like doing it for a decade and doing it well and living a good life. That was good, right?
Okay.
Um, what was happening is probably the last 2 years that I was doing it, because I was still a solopreneur at that point. I had independent contractors and people that I partnered with, but it was basically myself,
Mhm.
and I started to get like just a little lonely. Like I wanted to be
Yeah.
part of a team again,
Yes.
but I didn't want to hire, like I didn't want to,
Right.
do
You didn't want to
employee.
be in charge of the team. I
No,
gotcha.
no, no,
Right?
no, no, no. So yeah, and then, I took a long time just sort of being open to opportunity. I wasn't like I wasn't going after it real hard. I just was open.
Mhm.
And I had a company come to me, that was based in California. It was an education company with a concept, and I have some background in education. It's a really cool, exciting concept that just excited me. So it was
Mm-hmm.
more like, oh, this is cool. And they wanted to grow their schools and expand nationwide and do all of those things. And that I was, oh, this is cool. I could move to a new place, have a new era of life,
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what I did. And that was in 2014 um, that I
Right.
did that.
So you stepped into a role on a team of an entrepreneurial company, essentially.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
yeah, because I
true.
think it would be
That's
really hard
true.
for people like us who have been doing their own thing, have been entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
to step back into like a really traditional kind of company. Like we
You're
could never go
absolutely
work
right.
for like IBM or something because no,
No.
too much structure. But you're talking about, an entrepreneurial, and I talk about this too. Like you don't have to be an entrepreneur, like out on your own doing your own thing, to have an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes. Yes. Exactly right. And yeah, and even when I was in that role, when I was hiring leaders, and that's what I
Mm.
was looking for. I was looking for other people with entrepreneurial spirit for sure, because we were trying to grow a new business. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's a whole different mindset. That kind of business. Those are the kinds I've always worked for too. When I
hmm
was working for someone else, it was always like smaller entrepreneurial ventures.
yep, yep,
Yeah, I love
exactly.
that energy with
hmm
that.
hmm
Yeah. Okay, so how long were you there? And then because you're not still in California now,
That's right.
things
I was
got
there
fine
for,
again.
it got fine again. Well, and then COVID doesn't help, right?
It's true.
It was, there was, it
Nothing
was,
was fine about that.
it was a factor for sure. So yeah, things were fine. We actually got acquired by a larger company just before COVID.
Mm.
So during COVID, now mind you, I was a leader and an executive of a network of schools. So leading schools during the pandemic was, I mean, it was really, really rough, really rough.
Yeah.
So that plus the fact that we had just been acquired, so we were trying to navigate all of that. It was just a really, really intense time, and
Mm-hmm.
all my energy went into that job 24/7, through the pandemic because it had to be. It,
Mm.
it required that. So as things started to, open back up and everything, like probably early 2021-ish, all of a sudden I felt myself just spiral. It was like I had nothing left. I was like,
Mm.
you know, I can't, and I just needed something new. I just needed something fresh and new. And I knew I needed a break. And I knew that like a vacation wasn't going to do it. I knew it had to be more substantial. So that's when I started planning for my sabbatical. So
Yes.
I took probably a full year, almost to plan for the sabbatical that I took in 2022.
Okay, so what were you doing in 2021 while you were planning it? Were you still working?
I was still in the job. hmm
Okay,
hmm
all right.
Yes.
And when you say planning, explain that to me a little bit more. And I'm asking because I know that people who are listening are like, well, how exactly did you do that? Because like
hmm
I can't afford it, or I don't have the time, or whatever the people who are listening have a reason, an excuse of why they can't do it. Listen up because you can.
You can. Yeah.
Tell us how
Well,
you did it.
how I did it. Well, I knew that I had to financially prepare myself for it.
Mm-hmm.
I had to figure out, okay, well, how much money do I need, and how much time do I need? And so, what do I need to what period of time do I need to like prepare for,
Mm-hmm.
financially? And in doing that, while I was doing that, I looked at my expenses and started going line by line and really trying to cut back wherever and however I could.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and while I was still collecting a nice paycheck, so I'm like and saving pretty significantly. So I did a lot of like financial preparation. Um, at the same time, while I did that, I realized that if I just took time off while I was living in California in my apartment that I was in, that was going to put a lot of financial pressure on. Really expensive in California. I know it's expensive
Mm-hmm.
in DC too. It's expensive in New York, but it was cost prohibitive for me to stay there. I knew that I wouldn't feel as free and relaxed as I needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I need to start thinking about that. Like, what did I want to do about my living situation? Took a look at when my lease was going to be up, which was spring of 2022, and started to think about where can I live and how can I live and what am I going to do. So, um, and I wasn't really, all I was focused on was the sabbatical. I wasn't focused on the after the sabbatical because
Uh-huh.
I, I just took it like one thing at a time, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's virtually impossible to plan what happens after the sabbatical because the sabbatical changes who you are.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I did, and luckily, my brother and sister-in-law were generous enough to let me come stay with them for my sabbatical, and I was even able to leave, like you and I were talking before we started recording about getting rid of belongings.
Mm-hmm.
I sold or donated 80 to 90% of my belongings and shipped the rest cross country to New Jersey where my family was and put it into storage. Um, so I put myself into a situation where I knew that I could take at least I was giving myself permission to take 3 months of no, I did not have to think about what was next. Like I didn't have
Yeah.
to make definitive plans. My whole goal in those 3 months was to be still, to heal, to get healthy again physically, emotionally, mentally, um, and in whatever way I needed to, and give
Mm-hmm.
myself the space to do that, which is not in my nature. Like I'm a planner. You know
Yeah.
how it's just I have
Right.
to have action plans of what's next and where plan, and so that took a lot just to give myself permission to let go of all that, just immerse yourself into that 3 months and leave it
Yeah,
at
I
that.
like that you just said that you gave yourself permission. Like,
Hmm.
we feel like it's, I can't. I can't
Hmm.
do this. And it is about giving yourself permission. No one else is going to give you permission. You have to give it to yourself.
That's right.
And that's okay. I think, too, to your point, as high achievers, because you are firstborn, right?
Yeah. And the only
But you don't
daughter.
have to be firstborn to be super
Right.
high achiever.
Hmm.
Uh, but we have this, like, I can't give myself that permission.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like if we're not being productive and accomplishing things, then we are total losers.
That's right. That's right. You hit it right on the head. So, and that takes time to get over that, or even to let that go and to
Yeah.
reframe it.
Reframe it is exactly what we need to do and what you were able to do
Hmm.
because, again, it's just a belief. It's not
Hmm.
even true. It's just a
Right.
belief that we've been instilled with,
Hmm.
and it can be changed.
Absolutely.
What I was going to say before, too, was I think it's the high achievers like us who need it the most.
Right. Yes, that's why I've been preaching it ever since I've done it. And
Mm-hmm.
I was so glad to see, your book on it and how you talk about sabbaticals and the importance of it. I've been like preaching it for a year
Right.
now.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to do it. You got to do it.
Right. It's like the new study abroad.
Yeah.
When we were in college, everybody was doing a study abroad semester. Now it's
Yeah,
all about taking sabbaticals. We're at the other end,
exactly.
a couple years later. We'll go with
Yeah.
that. It's a couple
Yeah.
years.
Few years.
Now it's about taking sabbaticals and giving yourself the time to again explore, and
Hmm.
because that's what it was about when we were doing semester abroad. It was about exploring new cultures, new, who am I now? as
Hmm.
we were coming into adulthood. Now that we've been through a few years of it, it's like, okay, again, who am I now?
Hmm.
What did you find out?
Exactly.
What did you do? You said you went to New Jersey, but you didn't stay in New Jersey the whole 3 months, right?
No, I traveled around, just like you were saying. I definitely stayed on the east side of the Mississippi. I saw in
Mm-hmm.
your post mentioning about that, because most of my friends and family and closest loved ones are all on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people that I haven't spent quality time with in quite a few years. Again,
Mm-hmm.
because of pandemic.
Yep.
Um, and so I spent some time with family and friends that I hadn't connected with. It's like really good quality time, which was amazing. But didn't like put pressure on myself in terms of like a timeline or a schedule. It
Right.
was pretty loose, and it felt good to be embraced by everyone. Like I really
Mm-hmm.
needed that at that time. You, I might have been initially worried about being faced with judgment of what people would think. I left my job, and it was a good paying job and all that. And so there was a little bit of, worried about getting judged for that. But it felt good and validating how many people who I love and care about were so supportive. They were so there for me,
Yeah.
um, and welcomed me into their homes, basically, during that
Mm-hmm.
time.
Is that what you did? Is you stayed with friends and family as you were traveling around on your sabbatical?
Yes, yes. Did I have any? I don't think during those 3 months I had trips. I think I just went from place to place. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
It was
So
nice.
again, that's another way to do it is
Hmm.
when you know people and you can stay, it cuts down on some of the costs of,
Hmm.
having to stay in a hotel all the time.
Right.
Um, yeah. And then what happened after those 3 months? What?
Well, I had a lot of clarity. So I while I tried not to put expectations on the sabbatical, about what I expected to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping some sort of transformation would occur, but I was trying not to expect it because I think
Right.
in some ways that sort of defeats defeats the
Yeah.
purpose of the sabbatical, right?
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but I was able to take enough like time and space and stillness and get back to things that I love, that I was able to just really clear out my thoughts and get clear on my heart on what I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
do. So I realized, number one, I didn't want to work for somebody else again at this time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very, very clear. I wanted to give back and help women, and women similar to myself and of our age group. So that was really, really clear. I wanted to do something in that way. And I wanted to continue this nomadic lifestyle, in for as long as that was feasible and as long as that was still enjoyable and doing good things for me. And I wanted to just sort of be in the moment and enjoy the journey a little bit more.
Yeah.
So that was really, really clear. And so that's what I started and continued doing after the sabbatical was over.
Okay. So you're still out on the road traveling around.
Yes, yes. It's a little different now. I found that for me, because I'm a very introverted extrovert or a very extroverted introvert. I don't know, one of the other.
Mm-hmm.
The perfect mix for me is to spend about half my time with other people around and half my time by
Mm-hmm.
myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of designed my life that way. So I've been hopping around to different Airbnbs or hotels. I've done a couple of international trips. And then I sprinkle in visits with family and friends and
Yeah.
going back to California and like all that. So I kind of craft it. And I usually do it like month by month, figure
Uh-huh.
out what's going on. Um, and I've loved it. It's been fantastic.
It's really interesting. So I started talking about the sabbatical after I did mine a year ago, and found so many people who were doing that, and now I'm about to embark on the nomadic life as well, and I'm finding so many people who are doing that. Again, it's like we're. I think there's this movement or something. I don't know. Maybe it's
Yeah.
just the people I'm hanging out with, but it's interesting because like you and I were not hanging out before we reconnected a few months ago, and yet we're seem to be on similar paths
Yeah,
in terms
exactly.
of what we're doing. So somehow the universe is bringing people together. Like when you start down a path, the people who are doing something similar to you start showing up so that you
Yes.
can have, you can find your tribe and band together kind of like.
Yes.
And
Yes. I think
and I
so.
say that because again, anyone who's listening and who's thinking, well, I don't know anybody who's doing this, once you start moving towards it, the other people who are doing it and who can support you start showing up.
You're absolutely right. And part of it has come from launching a podcast, so launching a
Mm-hmm.
podcast and having a more consistent online presence, putting out there a lot of what I've been doing and how things have been going. That's what started to connect me with more and more and
Mm,
more people who are on similar paths and doing similar things and learning from them, and
yeah,
finding out from their experience and seeing that people are doing it in different ways, like they're just
right.
designing ways that work for them. But it's really exciting. So
Yeah, it really is. And it's so cool. I like that you said that everybody's doing it in different ways because it's about
mhm.
finding what works for you. I mean, in life in general, it's about finding what works for you and not really caring and paying attention so much to what other people are saying about that.
Mhm.
Like you
Right.
were saying in terms of taking the sabbatical, like not you were afraid people were going to judge you for it, but you did it anyway.
That's
And
right.
then you found that they weren't judging you.
Mm-mm. No, no.
Yeah,
They
right.
were they were supportive, They were like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
So,
had never up until that point, Lori, I had never taken a break from work, like
what?
ever. I'd never. I mean, I've gone on vacations, but
Okay.
like between jobs or between opportunities or whatever, I never took downtime in between.
Mm.
I always went from one job to the next or one job to a business or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
From 11 years old.
Right. Right. Well, and that's exhausting.
Right, exactly, exactly. But I know that, but as I talk to other people, and I don't, I think it's a generational thing for us because I think the younger generations are getting better at that, the taking the break and taking the time
Mm-hmm.
and all that kind of stuff. But our generation, I do think struggles with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's like no, no, I got it. I got it.
Yep.
It's I don't need any help. I got it. Like,
Right.
but there's no shame in asking for help or accepting help or even just taking care of yourself on your own. Like just doing what you
Hmm.
did, doing what I can't to saying I can't or I choose not to. You can. We did
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
I choose not to do it this way anymore.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah. And there's again like there's a power that we have to accept and step up and take to do this for ourselves and for the people who have families for them. You're not taking
Yes.
away from that. It's fueling it. It's making you better so you can be better for them.
Yes. I agree wholeheartedly. And like even, as I talk to other women and men, even that have like more because they have kids or because they have a
Mm,
partner, um, I still feel like it's so critical to just take that time. You might not be able to do like a 3 month, move
right.
across country thing, but I just feel like taking some sort of time for yourself is just so critical,
It
in order to
absolutely is
just be
critical.
still. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's also why I created the handout thing that I have. Handout. It's like we're in school. No, the download of the
Uh-huh.
5 easy ways to start living a sabbatical life. In that, it's like it doesn't require you to take a month off or a year
Right,
off or like
right.
how can you incorporate this sabbatical life into every day so that you're
Hmm.
not burned out at the end of the week and you're like, all you can do is sit in front of Netflix with a bottle of wine.
Hmm. Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying
No,
like that
there's a time and place for
you don't
that too.
want that to be your whole default every single
Right.
week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Cool. Well, we've mentioned a couple of times. Oh, well, you know what? I'm going to go there in a second. First, I'm going to ask you what your hype song is.
Yes, Let's Get Loud by J-Lo.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, yes. And
That's what we need to
I've
do.
actually used that as a walk-on song before for an event that I was one of the speakers at. They asked me for like, what's your walk-on song? I'm like, Let's Get Loud. It just
Right,
you
right.
can't not get pumped up when you hear that song.
Absolutely. Great song. I will put a link to that in the show notes. Okay. And then the next question I was going to ask you, which was because we've mentioned it a couple of times, is about your podcast.
Hmm.
So, what's it called? Where can people find you aside from the podcast if they want to continue a conversation with you?
Sure. Well, the name of my podcast is Blueprint Breakers, and we celebrate empowered women in midlife and beyond. We cover a variety of categories, dating and menopause and retirement and travel and all career, all the things. And I love to highlight the women who are living a life outside the traditional lifestyle blueprint, whether they're
Mm-hmm.
single or don't have kids or whatever. So that's my podcast. It's on all the platforms where you normally find podcasts. And you can reach me on Instagram at amypalmer.today. So it's amypalmer.today because I don't know, it always changes. So you can
Yeah.
find me there as well.
All right, cool. And I will put links to those things in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining me today on Fine is a Four-Letter Word.
Thank you. It was so fun talking with you, Lori. Thank you.
All right.